welcome back to another video. This one's going to be a little bit different. It's really just going to be about some of the most special parts of my gear collection, and not necessarily specifically going to follow up with a game at the end. There is going to be some game footage because I have actually taken all of this stuff out on the ice more than once. And I'm really, humbled by the fact that I've been able to do such a thing with such special, important parts of the goalie gear history. Getting it started right off, I want to talk about the gloves. So this glove right here is a 1960s Cooper Weeks GM9 Black Diamond model, which is black leather. This is basically modeled after the old Kineski claw design of glove. It was Cooper's version of that. And this design, this model, is from 1965 to 1970. And the reason we know that is the vertical stitching in the palm. That didn't come about until 1965. And the story behind that actually is really intriguing. I've been able to talk to a goalie from Sweden, Christer Kjellsted. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that right. Back in the 60s, he had a GM10, I believe, and he didn't like the original way the stitching was done in the palm of the glove. What would happen is, I believe the felt inside of there would settle and bunch up, and he didn't like that. So he took his own glove apart as a teenager and played around on a sewing machine and came up with a few different options that he tried out, and eventually he ended up on this, and it worked out great for him. So he drew up some diagrams, airmailed that in an envelope with a letter to the Cooper Weeks company, and eventually he got a letter back from John Cooper, who's the son of Jack Cooper. Jack and Cecil Weeks owned Cooper Weeks, and they apologized first off that it took so long to get a letter back to him. But then they went on to explain that they looked at his designs and they ran it through the R&D department, and they made up some units and they tested it out and they liked it. And moving forward, 1965 on, they were going to switch their glove stitch to that, which is just a amazing story when you think about how business is in today's modern world. That it starts kind of with an apology about the time it took to reply. Well, we're talking the 60s. And that was airmail from Sweden to Canada. And then it had to get to the right person's desk. And then it had to go through, first of all, he had to give it the time of day. Some kid from Sweden, teenager, making a suggestion to one of the biggest companies in the world at the time. Took the time to look into it and try it out and play with it. And then to write a letter and mail it back to him. I mean, it shows how the company ran at the time. You look, it's a very, very small pocket or palm and a pocket. The T is actually part of the body of the glove. It's not a separate T. So it's cut like a W on the front and the back, and then connected with this top of the T, I guess you call it. But cool glove, very small, very stiff wristed, and not much in there to protect your hand. I believe there's just a lining of felt, really. I want to thank, too, on this video, Paul in Hamilton. He's the collector that sold me this glove, and he parted with it so that I could have it, and I couldn't be more grateful. I think that's amazing. It is in good hands, even though those hands don't catch a whole lot of pucks. More on this in just a minute. And now we'll move on to the blocker. And this particular blocker is a Cooper Weeks GM10 blocker. Well, you'll see that the blocker board face itself is super, super thin, and it's laced on top of basically a glove with a little bit of blocker board above the fingers, a little bit of foam. So the stiff board is a surface that's laced on top and bottom to kind of a glove of sorts. This is an evolution from, originally they were those big, almost like boxing looking gloves because they didn't really block pucks with it. They just used it to hold the stick. So then eventually they came up with the concept of putting a board on top. And this is an evolution from that, because it's not truly one of the boxing style gloves, big padded gloves. It does have a horsehide palm. It does have finger loops that I've removed it from, because the palm is pretty stiff as is. But then when you try to trap your fingers into these little finger loops, it really stops you from being able to grip a stick. And when you use this with an old wooden stick, the size is different, the weight is different than modern sticks. It really cramps your hand up from you have to hold, because you're resisting against this horsehide palm. It does have a one-piece thumb on it, and that does add a lot of protection. And leather cuff as well on this one. So really the other thing to add about these two particular gloves, a few years ago I was actually lucky enough with my son, whose name is Cooper, to meet John Cooper at an event, and I happened to have these gloves with me along with a few other things. And so while we were talking to him, I did ask him if he wouldn't mind throwing a John Hancock or a John Cooper on there. And so both of these are actually signed by John Cooper, who eventually ran the Cooper Canada version of the company after his dad retired. The mask, I won't talk a whole lot about the mask because I have shown this before. I'll be honest, I don't know the maker of this. There was a point before that Winter Classic that Bernie Perrant played in, there was a manufacturer that was making replica masks of his and selling them kind of like at retail quality. And this isn't one of those, but it looks a lot like one. So it may be from the same maker. I'm not really sure. It is a solid mask. It is well built. I've worn it many times. People have looked at it that know more than me and said, yeah, it seems to be a game quality, wearable design, full sheets of fiberglass, not strips of fiberglass and stuff like that. This has gone through several different paint jobs with me. I'll show some photos here of the different designs I've done, which included just a month or so ago when I repainted it white and I put the Philly logos on, and then I made my coronavirus hockey mask, gameplay mask that would fit over it. And what I did was I used heat press vinyl and put little circles to match the pattern so that it really didn't stand out like I was wearing a mask. It didn't ruin the look of the mask itself. So I actually have taken, because this is a question I get asked all the time, I have taken pucks off the face. The first time I believe I wore this was a league I play in during like a break time, holiday break or something, organized like a pickup game in which some family was allowed to come. My son was there. Somebody else's son was there, and he was maybe like 19 or 20, and I'm pretty sure was playing some level of collegiate hockey, or had just recently played high school hockey or something. And I did take a wrist shot from him at about the hash mark, right off the corner of the nose eye area here. I'm going to show pictures of the aftermath of that. That one's kind of, it didn't stun me, like physically stun me, my head ringing or anything. It stunned me because it was loud. It was the first shot I took off of it. It was loud. My nose hurt really badly. It wasn't broken. It didn't bleed, but it was sore for about a week. And I also took a shot right off the top of the dome in that game too. Both were hard enough that they left scuff marks. This was the one here that really drove the point home about like what guys must have gone through in gameplay if they did, especially at high caliber shots coming at them, because that's a dead spot on the design of the mask. If it had hit here, it would have deflected. If it had hit here, it would have deflected. The one that hit here just skimmed off. This one kind of hit and came to a dead stop and dropped. Anyway, that's the mask. Anytime I've worn these, I've worn this mask with this gear. So we move on to the pads. These pads are 1950's Kineski K444 model with no outside knee roll. So you can see the knee rolls go edge to edge. These actually measure out to about 31 inches. So they do, theoretically seem short, but pads in the 50s were shorter than pads in the 80s and 90s and so on. This particular pair have been, I believe, recovered in the back. I never fully got a definitive answer on that, but I can show you why I think that in just a minute. The pads are horsehair stuffed, K-Pock and horsehair. The two guys everybody thinks of are Gump Worsley and Johnny Bauer, that both wore this style, custom built from Kineski with no outside knee roll. The question has come up a lot in discussion about vintage gear in why would they go without that vertical roll at the knee? And I'll be honest, I've never really got the definitive answer from anyone or any book. I'm not even sure I've ever seen where anybody was interviewed why they chose that. What I will say is this: if you go back in time to when Pops Kineski patented the first true ice hockey goalie pad, the patent clearly shows that it's edge-to-edge knee roll. I believe the patent was filed in 1925. You have to think to yourself, well, if that's the first ice hockey goalie, what was before that? Well, before that, there was basically like lacrosse leg pads that were being used in ice hockey, or a variation thereof. And historically, those didn't have that roll. They were edge-to-edge knee rolls. And they were much thinner knee rolls, too. So Pops went from realizing that that wasn't the best protection, specifically, they weren't very thick, and designed this pad for ice hockey use. He had to be basing that decision, that design off of, oh, there's the patent right there. So he had to be basing that design off of what he had experience with, and that was customizing and modifying lacrosse type pads for ice hockey goalies. And so I guess naturally that was the assumption, is that's the design that he's been customizing, reinforcing, stuffing extra into, and repairing, that he would just say all those things I was doing to those, I could just build into a pad as a specific ice hockey pad. And so maybe that's where that design comes from, because if you look back through photographs from the 20s and 30s and 40s, primarily they were still wearing that design in a goalie leg pad. So when you think about some of the older goalies, Brimzek and the Cat, Emile Francis, that wore pads without the outside roll. So they would be coming from growing up watching goalies that didn't have it, and moving into that era of the time frame when that seems to be the design in the pad. But then you jump forward into, Gump Worsley and Johnny Bauer, and you think, well, at their point in their careers, like, everybody was wearing the modern style Kineski pad with that roll on the outside. But I think if you really stop and think about it, maybe the answer, my gut has always been that maybe without that roll, you get more knee flex, right? So these are pads that are designed to be worn snug to the leg. When you drop down, it would curve up with your leg and protect the face of your knee and your thigh. Much easier than with that roll. That's been my theory. Some people have said it makes, I guess, the two pad stack smoother, the slide of the stack, because you don't have another surface there. Some people have suggested lighter. I don't think that's in any way involved in this. But then I stop and say, today's goalies try to emulate the goalies they grew up with or watched when they were younger. And I feel like maybe that was some of the decision making on why guys like Bauer and Gump maybe wore pads that emulated what people they watched when they were younger or at the beginning of their careers had been wearing. I've never really got the definitive answer on that, like I said. These are amazing pads. I love these pads. I'm so happy to have these in my collection. And these have a spot in my display case down here in the cave. They don't just intermingle with all the other stuff. And so what I was going to say about the way that back leg channel is I happen to also own a second set. These need a little bit of repair work still to them, and I will get to that eventually. I don't plan on wearing these. They are a lighter color leather, and they also appear to have not had as much use in their lifetime as the other set. Again, these measure out at about 31 inches, and I'm sure that's some settling, you know, for both of the sets over 1950s, so, you know, 70 years. These are in really great shape as well, but what I was going to say is when I look at the leg channel on this one, you can see it's a felt leg channel. Now, this particular set of pads, one of the ways you age these is up here we have a tag. It's a store tag. These would have been special ordered through a supplier that had a partnership or a like reseller or distributor agreement with Kineski. So they would have been special ordered, and then Kineski would allow them to put their own label on them. And this particular set is pretty worn, but there is a Lippmann Sporting Goods from Detroit tag on the inside here. And Lippmann Sporting Goods went out of business in 1959, so these are pre-1959 pads. That's the kind of stuff you dig up when you're researching and learning about the vintage gear. You come across that, and that's the kind of stuff that helps determine age or location and all that stuff. It doesn't hurt to also have contacts that maybe were connected to the company and whatnot, and you can ask them as well to confirm things. I feel like this set is older than this set because that repair, I feel like that was a repaired leg channel. That's a canvas type material, like green army canvas. But you can see some of the felt sticking out, and it's an older style. I really don't know. It's more like a foam type felt. And I'm pretty sure that predates the white felt that was on these. So there's the gear. There's a little bit of, you know, behind the scenes knowledge of the gear. I hope you like this video. I kind of like talking about this stuff and sharing the stuff that I've learned. I enjoy wearing this stuff on occasion. I really get a thrill out of it. So it's been fun for me over the years to have learned about the history of this, been able to acquire this type of stuff, be the caretaker of this stuff for the future. And that's why I do these videos and share them. It's about the gear and appreciating it, appreciating the history of where we've come from. I mean, you will get hard pressed to find any wider variety of gear evolution than comparing something like this to a modern day goalie pad and seeing, I mean, just by looking at the gear, you can tell the game itself had to have changed drastically over 70 years. Anyway, if you like the video, feel free to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Hit the thumbs up button. Leave comments. If you've got any other information that you want to share with me, or any questions you want to ask about any of the gear in the video, let me know. I'd be more than happy to have discussions like that. If you know anybody that might enjoy this video, feel free to share a link with them. And thank you.